I didn't find out my husband was cheating the way people expect. There were no messages, no confessions. I noticed something worse. He stopped reacting to me, and my mother started finishing my sentences. I have always been described as too much, too loud in the mornings, too colorful in my choices, too emotional in rooms where silence was preferred. I moved through life like a spill, uncontained, unapologetic, alive. I talked with my hands. I changed my mind often. I filled spaces instead of blending into them. The world I came from did not like that. It liked clean lines, neutral tones, predictable routines. My mother's house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Nothing was misplaced. Nothing raised its voice. Even laughter sounded measured, as if joy itself needed permission. I learned early that order could be a weapon, that silence could dominate more efficiently than shouting. Still, I resisted. I painted my rooms. I rearranged furniture at midnight. I stayed messy on purpose, as if disorder could protect me from becoming invisible. I did not yet understand that control does not always arrive aggressively. Sometimes it arrives smiling, calm, beige, offering safety, and sometimes it looks like love. My mother never yelled. She never needed to. Her power lived in routine, in expectation, in the way people adjusted themselves around her without being asked. She didn't demand space. She assumed it. Every room rearranged itself subtly when she entered. Growing up, I learned that boundaries in our house were flexible, but only in one direction. Hers extended everywhere. Mine ended where her comfort began. She knew everything before I said it, finished my sentences, corrected my memories. I was never outright silenced, just slowly overwritten. She called it care, concern, experience. I learned to doubt my reactions before trusting them. If something felt wrong, she would gently explain why it wasn't. And if I still felt it, then the problem was my sensitivity, my excess. Love, in her world, was proximity without permission, involvement without invitation. She was always there, always watching, always justifying her presence as necessary. By the time I left home, I thought I wanted distance. What I really wanted was air. I didn't yet know how familiar suffocation could feel when it returned wearing a different face. When I met my husband, he felt like the opposite of chaos. He spoke slowly. He listened without interrupting. His apartment looked like a magazine page, neutral, quiet, intentional. Nothing accidental, nothing loud. Being near him felt like stepping out of static and into calm. He called me vibrant, said he admired how alive I was. He liked watching me talk, watching me move. I mistook his stillness for stability, his restraint for strength. He felt like an anchor, something solid I could rest against without losing myself. At first, his calm softened me. I slept better. I planned more. I slowed down. It felt mutual, balanced, like two people meeting in the middle. But there were moments, small ones, where I noticed he preferred things a certain way. How my spontaneity unsettled him. How he corrected details casually. How his approval felt conditional on my ability to adjust. I ignored it. After all, calm felt safer than noise, and I had grown up believing that adapting was love. The shift wasn't dramatic. It never is. It happened in suggestions, not demands. In looks, not arguments. In praise when I complied, and quiet when I didn't. He liked me better when I was predictable, when I planned ahead, when I spoke less intensely. Slowly, my colors dulled. I wore neutrals without realizing it. I stopped rearranging furniture. I asked before changing things that used to be mine. He called it maturity, growth, stability, and I believed him because I wanted the peace he promised. I noticed I was apologizing more, not for actions, but for reactions, for feeling too deeply, for caring too much, for needing space. I was still present, but smaller, more contained, easier to manage. What I didn't see yet was that his calm wasn't neutral. It required maintenance, and I was the one maintaining it, piece by piece, quietly trading my scale for harmony. By the time I realized I had shrunk, He was already comfortable with the version of me that took up less room. The signs didn't arrive as red flags. They arrived as patterns, familiar ones, the same controlled silence, the same subtle authority, the same feeling of being observed rather than partnered. I noticed how he deferred to my mother, how quickly their conversations aligned, how naturally they spoke about me instead of to me. It was subtle, shared glances, mutual understanding, decisions made in my absence and presented as care. I told myself I was imagining it, that my history was coloring my perception, that I was projecting old wounds onto new relationships. Still, something felt rehearsed, too seamless, as if they shared a language I wasn't fluent in. I felt like a guest in my own life, watching interactions that seemed designed to exclude me without ever openly doing so. I didn't confront, I observed, I collected details. I watched how order tightened around me, and in that watching, something inside me stopped shrinking. It went still instead, calculating, remembering who I was before I learned to disappear. I didn't find out through a confession. There was no dramatic reveal, no messages left open, no raised voices. I discovered the truth through alignment, through the way stories matched too perfectly, through schedules that overlapped conveniently, through silence that felt practiced, through the unmistakable familiarity of control returning in a shape I recognized too well. When I understood what was happening, my first reaction wasn't pain. It was clarity. Everything made sense. The calm, the order, the way I had been reduced. They didn't betray me out of passion. They replaced me out of efficiency. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I didn't collapse. I analyzed. I understood the system they thought they were running quietly. And I realized something important. They believed invisibility was the same as absence. They believed silence meant safety. They were wrong. I didn't rush. I didn't lash out. I planned the way they lived, carefully, methodically, within structure. I used their values against them: reputation, order, appearances, the story they needed the world to believe. I gathered proof, not to expose intimacy, but to expose pattern, control, appropriation, replacement. I chose the setting deliberately: neutral, respectable, public. A space where calm was expected and disruption felt unforgivable, unless it was justified. I rehearsed nothing emotional. I prepared facts, timelines, documentation, the kind of truth that doesn't need volume to land. They thought I was quiet because I was broken. In reality, I was aligning my voice with precision. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage, it was reclamation. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I was making sure they could never pretend I didn't exist. I invited them separately. No hints, no tension, just politeness, normalcy, the kind that disarms. They arrived confident, composed, in control. Sitting side by side, they looked exactly as they always had, aligned, calm, unbothered. I let the silence stretch. I spoke slowly, clearly. I didn't accuse, I described. I laid out the sequence of choices they thought were invisible. I watched their faces shift as recognition replaced comfort. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult. I named. There is something terrifying about being seen accurately when you rely on silence to survive. Others listened. The room changed. Order cracked. I didn't need to humiliate them. I simply refused to protect them anymore. What followed wasn't chaos. It was stillness, the kind that feels heavy, irreversible. Their authority collapsed quietly. No shouting, no defense that sounded convincing. Control does not survive transparency. I watched them realize that the narrative they curated no longer belonged to them, that the calm they hid behind now worked against them. This wasn't decapitation by force. It was removal of power, symbolic, complete. I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. After it was over, there was no celebration, no relief that felt explosive, just space, real space, the kind I hadn't occupied in years. I noticed how quiet the world became when I stopped shrinking myself to fit it. I didn't rush to rebuild. I didn't explain my choices to anyone. I let the silence belong to me for once. Not the controlled silence they preferred, but the honest kind that comes after truth has been spoken and nothing is left to negotiate. I began taking up room again, emotionally first, then physically. I spoke without checking how it would land. I laughed louder. I allowed myself to be inconvenient. I stopped translating my needs into something easier for others to digest. They lost their power the moment I stopped protecting their version of reality. What replaced it wasn't revenge. It was clarity. He believed he could replace me quietly, without consequence, without memory. I didn't destroy him. I didn't need to. I simply returned to myself, fully, visibly, irreversibly, and that made me impossible to erase.